So we are up to Mishnah Tet in the third chapter of Ma'aser Sheni. Previously, we've been talking about the circumstances in which one can redeem coins or produce, and the Mishnah is continuing on this topic with the introduction of a new variable, which is tuma. And the next three Mishnah all deal with this question. So Ma'aser Sheni shenichnas liYerushalayim v'nitma. Ma'aser Sheni that enters into Jerusalem and becomes tameh. Bein shnitma be'av hatuma, bein shnitma bevlad hatuma, bein bifnim, bein bachutz. So the Mishnah is talking about four different, a 2x2 grid of different gradations of tuma. So tuma be'av with a primary source of tuma, which would be a deraita type of tuma, and vlad hatuma, which is a secondary tuma, which the Mishnah understands is a tuma derabanan. And the second axis along is bifnim bachutz, whether the produce became tameh inside the walls of Jerusalem or outside of the walls of Jerusalem. So we're talking about these four different cases. Beit Shammai omrim yipadeh ve'yachel hakol bifnim. Shammai says one can redeem the Ma'aser Sheni in this case, but it needs to be eaten. It needs to be so. The Ma'aser Sheni would get redeemed, as in you would transfer the Ma'aser Sheni status to a coin. Now, usually this would not be allowed, because once this Ma'aser Sheni comes into to Jerusalem, once this produce comes into Jerusalem, then we say that the walls sort of keep it in, and it cannot be redeemed inside Jerusalem. But for something that becomes tameh, everybody agrees it can be redeemed and it transferred to a coin. Beit Shammai requires that it should be eaten. It needs to be eaten inside of Jerusalem. So this former Ma'aser Sheni produce, which had become ritually impure, can be eaten inside of the walls of Jerusalem. Now it's just chulin, and it can be eaten. Chutz meshenitma be'av hatuma bachutz, except for produce that became tameh d'oraita outside of the walls of Jerusalem. And it seems that the Yerushalmi and the Bartanora discuss that the reasoning, Beit Shammai's reasoning, is he doesn't want people to get confused. That in general, we have a rule that Ma'aser Sheni produce cannot exit Jerusalem. It needs to be eaten inside of Jerusalem. And we don't want a situation where people start taking Ma'aser Sheni produce outside of the walls of Jerusalem. And so why does he make an exception for something that became tameh outside of the walls of Jerusalem d'oraita? Because then it seems to be a recognizable sort of exception. It's a severe form of tumah, and it happened even before it entered the walls. And arguably, this produce this mechanism of this halachic mechanism of the walls sort of grabbing the produce when it comes in, walls grabbing Ma'aser Sheni when it comes in, that didn't actually occur because it was already tameh when it was already tameh when it came in. It was invalid Ma'aser Sheni when it came in, and the walls didn't have this mechanism. Beit Hillel omrim hakol yipadeh v'yachel bachutz. It can be redeemed. It can all be redeemed, and it can all be eaten outside of the walls. It can go out. It can go out again. Chutz meshenitma bivlad hatuma bifnim. But Hillel says, actually, no, it doesn't. We're not concerned about this we're not concerned about this perception of that Tameh Ma'aser Sheni is going to come out, and people are already confused about this. That's not a concern of ours. So why does he make an exception for Ma'aser Sheni that became Tameh with a Vlad HaTumah inside of the walls of Jerusalem? In that case, that is because that is a Tumah de Rabbanan. It's arguably that produce is still on a deraita level. That produce is still Ma'aser Sheni, and so in that case, that has the strongest argument for needing to stay inside the walls of Jerusalem, because it's possible that on a deraita level that was already Ma'aser Sheni. So Bartenura that's the Bartenura understands that machloket between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. So the next Mishnah Yud, goes a step further. So we discussed in Mishnah Tet the question of Ma'aser Sheni produce that became Tameh. Mishnah Yud asks about produce that was bought, food that was bought using Ma'aser Sheni money, and that produce became Tameh. So is it the same reasoning? Is it the same law as regular Ma'aser Sheni produce? So the Tanna Kama says Yipadeh. Yes, it can be redeemed. So you had your original Ma'aser Sheni produce, your wheat, and you didn't want to bring it to Jerusalem, so you turned it into a coin. Then you went to Jerusalem, and with your coin, you bought a bottle of wine, and then your bottle of wine became Tameh, and now you can redeem it again, and you can buy you can buy a steak. And if that steak becomes Tameh, then you could buy something else, as long as you just keep redeeming it. So that's the Tanna Kama's position. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yikaber. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you actually need to bury this money. You've sort of done everything you could. You had your Ma'aser Sheni, you redeemed it, then you bought food, and then that food became Tameh. It's as though lightning struck it. It's like a dog ate it. You've done everything you can. You didn't manage to eat that food that you had redeemed, that you had bought using your redeemed coins. That's the end of the road, and you just need to bury it. And you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of eating this Ma'aser Sheni, but you did your best, and you need to stop that. So that's the machloket between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda. The rest of the Mishnah is discussing discussing an argument that with different sides of the distinction between Ma'aser Sheni produce versus produce that was bought from Ma'aser Sheni coins. So Amr Rabbi Yehuda, so they asked Rabbi Yehuda, Umai Ma'aser Sheni atzmo shenitma harehu nifta halakuach bekesef Ma'aser Sheni shenitma. So Ma'aser Sheni itself can be redeemed. How could you say that something that was bought using Ma'aser Sheni kesef could not be redeemed? It seems like it's sort of it's a step removed, and so you should be able to redeem it. Rabbi Yehuda says no. There's actually a way in which Ma'aser Sheni is maybe we're more lenient with Ma'aser Sheni than with produce that was redeemed from Ma'aser Sheni coins. Ma'aser Sheni atzmo shekain hu nifda b'tahor b'richuk makom. So yesterday we talked about this case where if you that you can redeem it for a coin from a long distance. בכסף מעשר, שאינו נפדה בטהור בריחוק מקום. No, you once your produce has been redeemed for the coin, it cannot be redeemed another time. So we talked yesterday about if you have a coin in Jerusalem and you can sort of redeem that coin and put it onto produce, but then that produce actually needs to go to Jerusalem. It can't be redeemed again. So similarly, one might say that if it becomes tameh, then you would not be able to redeem it. So that's this machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanna Kama. The next Mishnah Yud Aleph, discusses three additional arguments between Tanaim related to redemption of Maaser Ma'aser Sheni and of Ma'aser Sheni that became Tameh. So tzfi shelekacho bekesef Maaser, if you bought a deer with Ma'aser Sheni money or a gazelle and it died, yikaber al yedei oro, it needs to be buried. You cannot redeem it. Rabbi Shimon Omer yipadeh. So now you have this a deer corpse, and the only thing it could be useful for is to give it to dogs as food, and we consider that is a desecration of Ma'aser Sheni. So we require it to be buried. Rabbi Shimon says it can be redeemed. If you bought this gazelle live, and you shechted it, and then it became tamei v'nitma, yipadeh, then you could redeem it, just like in the Tanna Kama in the previous Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Omer yikaver, but Rabbi Yossi is strict and says it still needs to be buried. L'kacho shachut, you bought it as shechted meat, v'nitma, and then it became a tameh. Parehu keperot, then it's just like the perot in the previous Mishnah, and there's the same machloket between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda regarding its status. So just to review, we had three Mishnayot today, dealing with a redemption of produce and of meat, depending on whether it is original Ma'aser Sheni, Ma'aser Sheni that was bought using coins.